Hello, my name is Sideshow, and this is another video series that I'm doing with Yiska of Winston's Lab and various other things like the Overrated podcast that he does as well. And the idea of this video series that we're going to be creating is that it's a 1v1 debate style podcast. Not the most strictly professional thing in the world. We don't have to follow any kind of I don't even know what they call the rules, actually. I remember looking it up a while back. I think they call it like the British Parliament rule set or something that most people in the world use for debating. Yeah. I don't think we're going to do that. You don't have to talk in the Queen's English or doff your hat every time you want to make a point. Or accuse me of having sex with pigs, which also comes up relatively frequently in the British Parliament, it seems. But instead, we're just going to be picking topics kind of whenever we come across something that we think would be interesting to debate, or we have differing opinions or think that each other are idiots. And occasionally, I mean, we're going to be, one of us is going to be playing devil's advocate or offering up the populist view so that we get kind of a back and forth between us and represent some ideas that perhaps the community values and we don't as much, but we're willing to support them for the sake of entertainment and the podcast, and hopefully some interesting discussion comes of it. So our topic idea for this time, for this episode, is the concept of what makes somebody the best player in the world, and Yiska is going to try and argue that Fleta rather than Ryu Je-hong is the world's best player, and I'm obviously going to defend Ryu Je-hong in this one. So I'm going to hand over to Yiska, where he's going to try and defend this outrageous viewpoint.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit like I took the short stick here just to get a topic going, but I actually found that it was rather easy to attack the claim of Ryu Je-hong as the best player recently. So what I was very happy with when we phrased this question, because it's inherently sort of semantic, is that we didn't say the best player of 2017. Because if we would say the best player of 2017, I think someone that was, I believe, 2 times MVP during the seasons they won Apex, that would be a very hard claim to make. I don't care about that whatsoever, right? Like, that doesn't matter to is. You made the grave error of not saying was.
I mean,
was in 2017.
We are still in 2017, Yiska.
Yeah, sure. Like, but the last half. So if we're taking the opinion, of superior analysts than us, then the last 3 months are the only things that ever matter, right? So not really, but yeah, the point is that I think over the recent time, and if you interpret is sort of more like not just to be fair, not just the last 3 months, but also how the year went for Fleta. I think I'm reasonably comfortable to defend that position. And the reason why that is so one thing I think a good player needs is a consistency that matters, right? So I guess I can reveal that before I actually had Profit for this very position, right? The reason I didn't go with Profit was that his burst seemed to a little bit too flashy in the pan, right? So the reason I looked at his games and he looked absolutely marvelous, right? Then the preseason rolls around. Gesture's currently having an off day, and I go back and just look at the games and try to see where Profit actually shined, and it looked like he was just having an amazing synergy with Gesture. Now, I apply the same thing to Fleta, and nobody's helping him. He has like 5 cruise ship anchors on his back, just dragging them along, right? And over the seasons, like, he had absolutely nuts games. Like, he had absolutely competitive Genji, Widow stats, Pharah stats, but he was like losing 96% of the fights while putting out like 11 kills per 10. Just like an effect stat almost. So
he's playing Farmville rather than Overwatch.
In a sense, yes. So
best player in Farmville. I'll give you that. He's the best player in Farmville.
I mean, he's farming the others, not necessarily. And that's also one important thing where I like to draw like a comparison here, because I think if we think of Fleta, and people who are familiar with CSGO, if we think of Fleta as Nico of 2016, I think we're getting very close there, because his mousesports team was hot garbage, if we're being honest, right? Sometimes someone, showed that they might have a little bit of potential. That was also true for Fleta. which was also largely predicated on the fact, because that's also another thing. If we're looking at the grand, skill set that a DPS player should have, it's like Fleta is not only able to be a space user, so other people open up space for him, which we've seen recently in Lunatic High, or rather Soul Dynasty, that he's able to use this space that other now world-class teammates create for him, but he's also a space creator for others. And that is mainly also because he has such a wide variety of champions he can play. Like, the guy can play 8 heroes just against Miraculous Youngsters, right? He probably has like an 11 champion pool, and only 2 of them are not competitive, I would say. Like, his Doomfist didn't look that good. But like his Pharah is absolutely not. The only person that realistically can, or the only 2 people, I would say, that can realistically battle him at the moment are Wicked, from what we've seen, but he doesn't have Tanya, and maybe AKM from what we've seen in the World Cup. Then he has a nuts Widow. He has a nuts Genji, probably because the Genji's outside of Overwatch League. Huxal outside of Overwatch League, Architect outside. He might be the best Genji in Overwatch. So to sort of cut it short and give you an, if you still feel like saying anything against these points, right? Like, he has the versatility, he has the ability to hard carry, which is almost unprecedented in Overwatch. Tell me a really shitty team where 1 player shined like he did. You won't find any. And he also has done it over a reasonable amount of time. And now that he's been put into this new, environment, first tournament, he gets the achievement, right? Against Miraculous Youngsters, probably the best player on their team. Granted, maybe against Kongo Panthera, not the best player, but certainly competitive, right? So that would be my open.
Okay. Now, I mean, to say that he's not the best player on his team in that final game, and he was the best player on his team when they played against Miraculous Youngster, that's 1 out of the games of 2 games he's really ever played in a competitive environment with a good team. Okay, we're judging small sample sizes here. One player that we're not judging small sample sizes for is Ryu Je-hong. As you said, Fleta may well be the best Genji in the Overwatch League, but the Overwatch League is not the world, and there are other very talented players outside of the Overwatch League as well. And Ryu Je-hong has basically been the best player in the world throughout 2017, I would argue. And there have been little dips where people have looked fantastic in individual tournaments, or people have really shone and been on a hot amount of form. But somebody that has always risen back up to the top with stellar performances has been Je-hong. And I think that really, we're obviously comparing in some sense apples and oranges here, because we're comparing a DPS player against a support. But this is part of the fun of thinking about who might be the best player in the world, sure.
Mate, I could tell you if my house cleaner does a better job than my doctor. You can't just compare excellence in some ways, right? It's not like you're completely oblivious. You're somehow aware of the skill set of a house cleaner and of a doctor.
If there's crap all over your house, but also you manage to get a kidney transplant, probably your doctor's better than your housekeeper.
Yes, exactly.
Or if your doctor kills you, but you've got a sparkling house. For starters, you've prioritized which you wanted as the better person, the better client there. But okay, so we can make comparisons between the 2 of them. And I think one of the biggest things that stands out for Je-hong is that he has a fantastic impact on support. And this isn't really somewhere where you would expect players to have a huge impact from, both in terms of playstyle, what he brings to his team, and just the raw amount of healing and plays that he's able to make, opportunities he creates or shuts down from the other team. And I think he really redefined impact on as a support player, because before we saw what Je-hong was able to do, I mean, this was like before we'd seen what Mirror's Winston was capable of. He really did redefine that in a sense. And I think when you look at Fleta, yes, he's very good on a huge range of heroes, but I think there are arguments to be made that he may not even be the best DPS player, maybe never mind the best player in the world. Whereas I think the impact that Je-hong has certainly puts him as the best support in the world, and I think elevates him to the best player in the world. The reason for this is that he's not just so much better than everybody else on his role, which I think is undebatable. There isn't another support that's on his level. He is thoroughly well-rounded in Zenyatta, Ana play. His ability to work within the team structure and work alongside other healers, for example, Toby, has been phenomenal, and the pair of them are just above and beyond everybody else. And it's also just impossible to plug and play him, though. There's nobody that you could pick to replace Je-hong in Lunatic High, but you certainly could replace Fleta in Lunatic High or Soul Dynasty and still have excellent performances, as they have done in the past, and as I'm sure they will do in the Overwatch League season when Fleta doesn't play, and for example they run Wicked and Bunny. But you won't see them replacing Je-hong and still having the same kind of performance. Who are you going to put in? Is Guido just going to hop in or something? Even if you brought in somebody like Unko or Chips, you wouldn't have that kind of performance.
I think so Unko, I'm not sure, because when Unko actually had decent players around him, or that were at the time decent, nobody actually said that Je-hong was clearly the best support player, if you remember back, right? Oh. So let's not forget, he also has probably the best Lucio Nix, which really makes him look much better in many situations than he actually could. Because we have seen, like, because of the LAN environment and how Tracer affects just, you know, the possibility of one clips, Je-hong, for instance, in both series actually against GC Busan, like, was caught out in the open or just positioned stupidly in a way that, you know, Prophet could just walk up to him, you know, Prophet would just open them up, right, in a way that, like, a man could basically climb into Je-hong's asshole, and it would basically look like the first 5 seconds of your Through the Grapevine podcast, but right, was like, right?
Okay, all right. But answer me this: was it anything to do with solely Je-hong's positioning? The reason that Lunatic High got rolled 3-0 both times by GC Busan. I mean, if Je-hong had been replaced by somebody who you believe was better at support, would they have won that match? Would they have been competitive in that match even? No, they would have been destroyed because they got outplayed in terms of team v team.
I mean, they were definitely outplayed in TV team, but I'm not too sure, because if you look at that series, I believe Je-hong was like first kill in 18% of the cases or something, which is really not a good stat. Then, people keep citing that for instance, his Zen is absolutely nuts. Yes, he's probably in the top 5 of Zens, but the era where we think of him as the best player, and I think this has tainted our view of Je-hong for a long time, that he was a very good Ana, possibly the best in the world, also, you know, riding on this wave of like clutch plays, where, you know, this is the support where you can make clutch plays, right?
Yeah,
with great nades, with great sleep darts, whatever, with sniping,
and he does consistently as well. He is a playmaker. That is kind of his play style. Let's see, who else was... Unko didn't to the same level, though. Unko has an incredible Zenyatta on him that is probably at the same level as Je-hong, and possibly even a better Mercy if you wanted to prioritize that, but his Ana isn't at the same level, I think. And the way that he plays within his team, and the way that he has set up like a structure for Je-hong and Lunatic High works way better. And that's not the team telling Je-hong, like, oh, if you stand here, you'll get a much better value out of it. That's Je-hong putting... Like, they realize that he's such an asset that they set their team up to empower him because he's so good.
I mean, they also set the team around him to appease his ego, because he's a bit of a tilt monkey from what we've heard, right? Like, that's also a big question mark, because if we're saying is right now the best player in the world, then I'm not too sure that he has proven that yet, because I don't think he was particularly, like, impressive in the preseason games.
This is preseason. This is show matches. Okay, I mean, this is. I'll grant you that this is probably the biggest stage that Fleta's ever played on. Sure. I mean, if you want to bring up the preseason because it's good for Fleta, fine. Yeah. But Je-hong's won 2 Apex seasons. He just came off the back of having an amazing performance at the Seoul Cup as well. That, like, this guy's been performing in tons of tournaments.
Amazing, but he probably wasn't bad at Seoul Cup, though. I would say at Seoul Cup, like that. I don't think if you have any other DPS player in that position like if you put Munchkin in whatever. So what they did was, I believe it was, they had Fleta on the entire series, so that was their lifeline, right? And then I think they switched in Munchkin towards the end of the series when it looked bad, right? They were behind. I think they came back from it 2-1, right?
Yeah,
but throughout these games, like absolutely nutty performances. Like I looked at, we have a new stat at Winston's Lab, right? Which measures basically the success rate of an ultimate, which is, we call it PUK, P-O-K. And it's the percentage of ultimates you get at least one kill with, right? With Pharah, every ultimate got a kill. You know what that means? If you have an ultimate on Pharah and every time you enter a fight, you made it a 5v6, basically. That's nuts. Like, if you make it 5v6, you're now at an 80% chance to win that fight. It's just over if Fleta is on, has these power play scenarios. So on attack, he's basically like, you will cap the point. It's just 100%. If that is a Pharah map, it will just happen, right?
Did Fleta have that same statistic when he was playing with Flash Lux? That sounds like you'd need a lot of support to be able to stay alive, you know, dude, when you do barrages like that and getting picks.
That's marvelous that you break that up, because he actually had 86% average, which is like 20% above the next best Pharah. So it was pretty nutty in that regard, right?
Okay.
Only in Apex. I haven't looked at Western stuff, right? AK might be. I'm not sure if he's actually particularly good at using the ultimate, but yeah. He just enforces power play scenarios on attack, which are just nuts. And then just think of the diversity. I don't think, for instance, Je-hong has a real problem. I see him having a real problem if, for instance, some situation would force him to play either Mercy or Lucio, right? What if Mercy and Lucio become meta? I think that might be a huge liability. There's no way to make Fleta not, be shaken by the meta. If a guy can play 7 heroes at a top class level, you're not going to make him irrelevant. It's just not possible. And what is nuts about him is, like, his Widow is probably top 3 in the league, if not the best. That's a hit scan character, high hit scan, right? And then he has the Pharah and the Genji, both projectile characters. Not only are they different, they are in projectile and hit scan, but they are also different in space creator and space user ability. So the fact we've seen him do both, and then also having Wicked and Munchkin slot into these positions, makes Fleta so valuable for Seoul. And that might actually be, I think that might much more than Je-hong, though obviously he has made himself irreplaceable by just not having any option around him, which I consider a flaw, honestly, right? Maybe you have to make Guido into that or whatever. I don't know. What happens if Je-hong doesn't perform during the season, right? Or
when is he not performed during a season, though? I mean, the reason that they have backups for people like Fleta is because they want different options if they need to run some crazy stuff on the DPS, because there's such wider variation in terms of the meta in DPS as well. I mean, it's not, it wouldn't be usual for things like Pharah or Genji to disappear completely out of the meta, but if they did, and you are running, for example, Tracer Soldier 76 for the entire time like you were previously, then probably you wouldn't run Fleta all the time. You would be running someone like Bunny and Wicked, or possibly Munchkin and Buddy, or something like this. So there are worlds in which you would sub Fleta out because there are better options, but there are not worlds in which you would sub Je-hong out because there are better options, even if you had your pick of other people around the world, unless there was a meta which we haven't seen so far yet, where you basically just have to run Mercy Lucio the entire time, at which point, yes, Je-hong doesn't have the best Mercy in the world. It's looked like a little bit of a liability when he was playing at the World Cup, but they still managed to win the World Cup, and they managed to put him in a position where he was actually playing a power position on the Zen Yada anyway, and they just had Toby running the Mercy, and Toby didn't play that well on it either.
They were able to win the World Cup while Je-hong was shitting the bed on Anna, like, for 2 maps in a row, right? That's not like everyone could, like, with that team, you could probably, I don't know, you could probably put Michael on support and win that World Cup with relative ease, right? Like, it doesn't matter.
It was certainly less serious, yeah, which is why it shouldn't really be used as a measure of whether or not someone's been performing very well. I mean, if you look at the guy's rating and his consistency over the course of the Apex seasons, is bananas. He's got something like a 1400 average Ana rating at a something like a 1200 Zen rating, average across the entirety of these seasons. This is like bananas statistics for a team that managed to get deep into Apex every time. I mean, you talk about Fleta on flash lugs, but the team in interviews afterwards is saying that they realize their only win condition is just like, okay, we have one good player, let's just try and make him carry us as hard as possible. It wasn't like everyone was trying to use resources equally in that team. They realized that there was only one good player among them, and then they put all the resources onto him, and yes, he's able to do relatively well, but he wasn't able to carry them. Now, you can definitely say that Overwatch isn't really a game where you can carry, and I think that's a reasonable counterpoint to that. But to say that he was carrying despite losing or something, I think is mitigated somewhat by the fact that the team were literally just giving him all the resources and trying to create as much space for him so that Fleta could go absolutely nutty. As well, with such dribbles on his team as were in Flash Lux, I reckon that you could pop Michael in there and he'd probably get 50% or something. These were some, like, you're only playing in the group stage, at least one of your games is against another mediocre tier Apex team, and then you have two relatively good Apex teams to play against. You're not going deep in the tournament, so you're not fighting against the best players again and again, and so your statistics should be higher if you only play in the group stages. I don't think it's so crazy that Fleta was hard carrying his team. He just was a very good player in a very bad team.
But, well, if it's not so crazy, then surely you can give me an example where another player did that to that degree in a shit team.
Well, there's never been another world-class player in such a terrible team before. The situation just hasn't happened. Because nobody, if they're normally that good, they get out of there. There's just some weird situation in which Fleta felt like he was loyal to the people at Flash Lux, or maybe they had him in a headlock every time as he finished a match or something. And he was playing in even worse conditions because he was just being strung up against the wall or something crazy like that. But there's just never been a situation where someone's been an absolutely world-class player on a carry DPS role, I don't think, and has played in such a bad team. Flash Lux were the worst team to be in Apex for more than one season, and somehow they managed to be in, were they in 4 seasons? They somehow snuck into the last one because there was no promotion and relegation. They snuck into the second one because
they were in the first season, but Fleta wasn't in that.
Yeah, they beat Rhino again. That's the only time they ever won a match.
Yeah, because of Fleta. That was one of the 50% games. He fucking was the lifeline in that
against Rhino Gaming's Titan. The only team that they ever beat. Okay, but here's a couple of thought experiments for you as well, which I think are pretty useful in determining who the best player was. So this first one is the concept of a combine, all right? You're going to have a combine, and there's all the players in the world, let's say, although I think we would probably have to narrow it down a bit so you didn't have to dig through all the comp queue to try and find out whether there was any hidden gems there. But, you know, out of all the known players that you have, who would you pick first? I think Je-hong is an incredibly good first pick if you were going to try and draft a team out. And like if we were kind of trying to ignore language barriers or something, so we were just trying to pick the best players we possibly could, I think Je-hong would be an incredibly good pick, because not only is he such a fantastic player that you can build a team around, there's also no other supports that are on his level. He's transcended what people expect of supports outside of a very select few, and he's still better than them. Whereas somebody like Fleta, I don't think you would first pick them, because not only is DPS somewhere where there's much more very strong players, but there are other players that are arguably on his level in terms of performance. I mean, people would cite guys like Flower on the same kind of level. They'd look over and see how large Tracer performances have been and cite people like Effect or Prophet in there. Birdring has also been at one point considered the best player in the world in terms of his DPS performances. I think there's so many other people that you would have to narrowly compare with Flare, whereas Je-hong is in a region all of his own and shines so brilliantly in that region that you'd even be distracted from picking a DPS player.
I mean, the thing is, if you get Je-hong first, you have to build a team around Je-hong. You might actually get fucked out. Like, if someone picks Toby for you, I'm not sure if that's actually... Because what's also true is there's never been Lucio consistently as good as Toby was, especially in keeping his Zen alive. This rating argument doesn't hold any water if the main point in these ratings is basically that your support doesn't die, which is a very high p-value, to be fair.
All right. But here's the thing with the whole him and Toby, because I agree to some extent they are a bit inextricable because they've always played together right way back. I mean, I don't think that there's ever been a game where, even if you go all the way back to, I think they were literally just the first 2 players on the team or something of Lunatic High, so I don't think even if you dredged right back through the VODs, although it'd be totally irrelevant back then. But when you look at it, it's not like Toby is providing all of the support for the duo in the sense that a lot of Western Lucio and Anna Zen's play. When you look at it, they have an incredible relationship between the two of them that also involves Je-hong and putting a lot of resources onto Toby. So you see him around. I mean, when I was doing this video about Toby, the amount of times you saw him with the Harmony Orb on him, zipping around the place so that he was being maximized, the actual output that Toby could have. You know, Je-hong using his resources on his support player effectively to make sure that he's being backed up. I don't really see, I mean, the nano boost that they occasionally use onto Toby to try and keep him in position, again, is an example of Je-hong's awareness of, this is one time where I can actually get value out of this and it would be a better play than losing it. And the majority of the time he's correct in using it as well. So I think that the idea
that's a play
Toby,
that looks absolutely ridiculous unless Toby is a nutter. We both know that.
Yeah,
in
for
95% of cases, you have a shit Lucio that doesn't frag whatsoever, and that was actually a very stupid decision.
But we're not rating it in comp queue based on a huge amount of players that he's playing with. He knows that he's playing with Toby, and he knows what Toby's capable of, and he's correctly using his resources based on his assessment of Toby and his assessment of his teams. And that's intelligent play. It's not a percentage play where he's like, okay, 5 times during tonight's games where I'm playing scrims, comp queue, and a match, I'm gonna use a nano boost on a Lucio. I just gonna randomly use him. Oh, it's time for another nano boost on the Lucio. He's intelligently using it because he knows that Toby will be able to get value out of it. But the point is that there's a dynamic going on here that's more than just Toby helping him. It's also him helping Toby and the rest of his team. And I think that aspect of his intelligence and the reason why that duo has been so successful is the two of them together, not just the fact that he's playing with Toby.
I mean, though, to be fair, you have to say that Fleta never had anyone to develop that synergy with. So while sure that can't be counted towards like a point for Fleta, it's very hard to count this in full against Fleta, because if we're looking at the breadth of character and play that we see in Fleta, really the only flaw he can put against him is either his stupidity in signing contracts or his loyalty towards shitters, right? Like, other than that, it's very hard to attack Fleta in any way because he just has this breadth of play. You know, there's also sick awareness, if we're being honest. Like, it's
he's very good. He is a very good player. What I would say to that, though, is that I don't think I actually need to attack Fleta as a player because he is incredible. The thing is that he is also replaceable. Lunatic High have won 2 Apex seasons without him. They also performed well in the preseason when they weren't playing with him. They've had performances similar to when, or even better than when Fleta's been playing on their team with other people. You have to pick out games to do that, but there's such a small sample size of when Fleta's been playing with them already that sure there'll be up and downs there. He's being plugged into the best team in the world, and other DPS players, like for example, Who Are You, have already done like what he's been able to do within that team.
To an extent, yeah, but only on one character, only very specialized, and only not across any variety of meta. Who Are You has only ever looked good on Genji in Lunatic High.
Yeah,
the other thing that I also want to say is it's not just Toby that's supporting Je-hong, right? It's also the tank line. And while, like, for the sake of it, I won't forsake my belief that Miro is not like Miro is one of the best Winstons in the world, because I think
he definitely is.
He sometimes is very exploitable, and I think we saw that in the GC Busan series where his ass also needed to be saved quite often. But what I will say is that it's very hard to also find a better diva player, or in general like off-tank player than Zunba, and who is protected by off-tank players just as well. I guess it's the flex support, right? Because the flex support is the breaking point of many of these team comps, right? And if it's not the Winston, right? For instance, most of the time it actually revolved about either Miro breaking or Je-hong breaking. And often Miro looked much worse because Je-hong was out in the open, needing a matrix, then Prophet just triple blinks back to Miro, who then looks out of position. When it wasn't his fault, it was actually Je-hong being open to the potential of being one-clipped, right? So, like, I think if Je-hong cries in voice, it's very likely that he's going to die and not Miro. That he's not going to die, but Miro is, right? So in that sense, he's not only getting much of the resources, he's also getting much of the best resources in the world, right?
But do you know why this is? It's not because he cries. It's because the team knows that he's so valuable and that he can, that his healing output and, like, if he's on Zen, his clutch potential, and also he's holding on to really important ultimates as well. They want to keep him alive because he's such a power player for them. If you have Miro and Gesture, or one on the other team, and you have Je-hong and Hagopion, actually Hagopion was playing very well, but you probably want to keep, in general, if you're playing against another team, your advantage, like, alive. You want to keep the player that's going to win it for you. For example, when you talk to the phase players, they don't care that their supports are being dived on. They're quite happy to have their supports being... Obviously, this is the previous phase team, not the contenders team that they're going to have now. Because all their focus is just on keeping Shadowburn and Carpe alive because they know that they're going to win it for them. If both supports on the team die, and it's a case of the tanks versus the DPS players, they have an advantage in that fight because Shadowburn and Carpe were better than most of the DPS players that were playing and have really good synergy together with each other. And it's the same situation for Lunatic High, I think. The reason that he gets so many resources and the reason that they focus their team around him, playing down sight lines that he can have an impact through, is because they know if they maximize the advantage there, they will get the best results for their team. And it has been proven. It has borne results. It has won them 2 Apex seasons while Fleta was just tugging on his willy in flash looks, getting knocked out repeatedly and looking from the sidelines.
I will tell you, I tucked my willy many times to Fleta's play.
Well, I'm sure you have.
But
this is the only reason that you would put him up there as best player, if you have some kind of sick perversion of the mind.
I mean, it's definitely his play, not his looks. I will tell you that.
Okay. Now we're getting to Barroy levels of banter. He's just
definitely
roasting people for their appearance.
But where was I? No, but wait.
So, okay,
so
here's another point for you.
Okay.
Je-hong is not just a support player that can only play support. You criticize his inability to play Lucio Mercio, but what he Lucio Mercio? Mercy or Lucio. But what he actually adds to the team additionally that we've seen many times is that he can play DPS heroes to a really high degree. And so when you're running these solo support systems, where normally they have Toby on Lucio, but occasionally they have Toby on Ana as well, because he's actually a decent Ana, you can see Je-hong pick up, for example, the Widowmaker, or the Soldier 76 is most often, sometimes picks up the Mei and has really strong performances in niche strategies where he's incredibly intelligent and where he's putting Mei walls, being able to block off certain Sombra routes or play Sombra himself and be able to dominate on him. He has a very large hero pool for a support player, and he's incredibly good at these DPS heroes. Not obviously at the same level as somebody perhaps like Fleta, but he's not actually playing the same heroes as Fleta most of the time anyway. But he plays kind of the more niche, off-pick, intelligent heroes and plays them to a very high degree. And we've seen him within Lunatic High play the Zarya and the D.Va before, and he was lauded as their best player on Zarya and D.Va. That was why they went through that weird shuffle when Dean...
So show me the plebs so I can execute them.
No, I don't mean by the plebs. This was the team. The team was interviewed and asked, why are you shuffling down your roles? Do you remember this shuffle where they had Dean started playing... Dean was main tank
in
for
these
them.
Dark times, dude.
Yeah,
that's like saying,
this was when Miro first went tank, actually, because Miro was playing off tank for them, right? So he was playing the Reinhardt Winston, and they switched it around so that Je-hong was playing Zarya and D.Va, and the reason for this was because he was their best player on the off tank, and they wanted to maximize that position. And this was in Apex Season 1. At the same time as, for example, teams like Envious are solidifying their dynasties. These guys are still messing around trying to empower Je-hong before they found the best role for him.
This is an argument for a stick being bitten on because morphine hasn't been invented yet, right? Like, these players back then were absolute garbage. Like, Dean should be banned from using a mouse ever again, right? Like, I don't think that holds water in that team. Like, think of this. That was a time in Overwatch where we thought Eska was a very good mechanical player. it doesn't count. That's just
he did have a really good May.
That.
He did have a really good May. All right, yeah. But so for sure, like if you look all the way back then, sure, the level of competition was reduced. You can't take anything away from their performances in Apex Season 2 and 3 where they actually won, because we saw like incredible team performances and individual performances up until that point. But also, I mean, throughout those runs and throughout the Seoul Cup as well, he was flexing onto different heroes. I think he ran Soldier 76 in the Seoul Cup against... I think it was Miraculous Youngster. He's played Widowmaker a few times recently. I think he played it in the preseason as well. Like this guy does have off picks that open up a huge range of potential for him as a support player outside of just playing support, which make him an even more valuable player in my eyes.
I mean, sure, but again,
can Fleta play support? Is Fleta a world-class Zen player?
I mean, by that same token, if we put him in Apex Season 1 against like the shitter competition, I'm sure he could have played 2 heroes at the same time and he could have shined. No, but like, okay, so if we're saying Ryu Je-hong is the best player, then surely you must believe that when the season is done, because, you know, now the highest probability is if he still is the best player,
sure,
then there's reason to believe that at the end of Overwatch League, he will be the best player, or he will at least be a better player than Fleta. You must think this, right?
I think that I'm thinking that concept through. I think that could be the case. I mean, the only reason it wouldn't be the case, I think, is that the Hall of Lunatic High puts all of their emphasis on empowering Fleta rather than Je-hong, perhaps.
Oh, why would they
Je-hong
do
slips
that?
back and they put Fleta in a really good position, in which case he may look better. But I think that if they keep up their similar kind of style, and Fleta, as I've said before, gets subbed in and out because he can't play every hero to a ridiculous degree that they require for the DPS, then yeah, I think that Je-hong could very well, has a higher probability of ending the season as still being the MVP for Seoul Dynasty rather than Fleta.
Yeah, I'm sure if you put Wicked in a room with very little light, bread and water for like 16 hours a day, he could be a better Doomfist than Fleta. Yeah, that is very possible. I will give you that. That is a possibility that they might not play Fleta in a Doomfist meta. Or alternatively, if they want to style on people and not bring out their
but also, if they were playing just a double hit scan meta, I think one of them wasn't Widowmaker, I think it is also still reasonable for Seoul Dynasty not to run Fleta, because they have Munchkin and Bunny, 2 really strong DPS players. They also have Guido, who they love to run with just because he fits into their system a little bit better, or they want more of like a passive guy who doesn't go for the big plays, which is Fleta's playstyle, right? Then I could see them definitely running like, if Soldier 76 and Tracer, as I've said, comes back into the meta, then I think Fleta is kind of their Genji, Pharah, Widowmaker kind of player. So I could see him being sat on the bench. And why would the best player in the world be sat on the bench? Makes no sense.
Exactly. Why would you put Fleta on the bench, right? So why would you exchange him there? No, but like the Guido argument is so weird, because Guido is the type of he's basically of the Clockwork school of Tracer, where he bees around like a second, you know, like
he's a very nice guy. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, like, you know, these pixie characters that in MMOs you get, and they do like little beams of damage that just like a fraction of your damage. It's just really not a real player character, but just, you know,
but it keeps people away.
Zen orb that can shoot, basically. That's what Guido is most of the time for his supports, right? So that's another reason why it made him look so good in a sense. If you think about back to Apex Season 2, the reason that that Runaway didn't look that good was because Eska was doing nothing else than, you know, covering Ryujehong's shortcomings and being one clip by, or, you know, killed by Stitch. And, you know, if you put then the guy that, yes, they built their strategy around him because, like, if you don't do that, he might smash the table like 2 stories deeper, right? That's why it's further up.
Well, that's your premise of why he plays on a higher table, not personal comfort, or it's just
personal comfort.
Instead, it's to stop him smashing the table. He's not Hulk. He's Je-hong. He is a superhero. I'll give you that. That's why he's the best player in the world. But he's not the Hulk. He would be like, I actually don't know enough superheroes. What's like Aquaman?
Yeah,
all right,
I like that.
You've beaten me in terms of nerdiness. I can't come up with a proper reference there. I was trying to think of like what's the hyper intelligent blue guy called that was in the Justice League or something, or the bloody
Professor something. Yeah, I don't know. Man.
I don't know. I was going for an intelligence piece of banter there, but completely failed. Don't have any intelligence myself.
I mean, in a sense, Fleta is almost like, you know, Superman, where it's like, oh, it's almost boring how good he is. He can just do everything better, like run faster than Flash, stronger than everyone, cannot be beaten. There's maybe, like, for him, there doesn't even exist kryptonite other than loyalty. So the worst thing that could happen to Fleta is Seoul Dynasty shitting the bed and him not being traded after 2 years while he, you know, drags that dead corpse behind him.
Well, do you know what the biggest kryptonite is of the whole argument for Fleta, for my opinion, is just the tiny sample size that we have of him actually playing against the best players in the best teams in the world. Because when he's played in his groups, who has he actually played against in a group? I think he played.
Should look it up.
Yeah, let's have a look at the people that he's played, because while it's undeniable, right, that he hasn't played at the same level of competition again and again, because he hasn't reached the same depth in tournaments, and therefore has played also far less games because he kept getting knocked out in the groups. But I also don't think that he's even played against any like a fraction of the kind of top teams that Je-hong or really any other what people would consider a candidate for best player in the world. I mean, people like Birdring, Effect, Flower.
Okay, so in Apex Season 2, they played against Runaway in groups. Eventual finalists, right?
Okay.
And Kongo Panthera and Fnatic.
Okay, yeah, solid.
You know, during a time when Kumet wasn't, you know, one of the best players in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Fnatic, imagine how much fecal matter was in their bed sheets from how... and they still managed to beat Fleta in that series. Happy Cool dunked on him, put him straight back to mid-tier. No, but my point was, my point here is that the sample size is so tiny, because we really haven't seen, like, you referenced the game that Je-hong's played against GC Busan, and if we'd only seen Apex Season 2 and Apex Season 3, I mean, there was no game where they just got totally smashed. This just simply didn't exist, where Je-hong was getting picked off repeatedly, and there were flaws in their teamwork and how they were setting things up, and there were these kind of openings, so you really wouldn't have, like, that avenue to attack his play. And likewise, there aren't that many avenues to attack Fleta's play, because either you can give the caveat that he was playing on a really bad team, so some of his average performances when he was playing on Flash looks like, fair enough, okay, you're playing on a trash team, you're getting rolled. And some of his great performances, you can say, all right, he had fantastic performances here despite getting rolled. It's only a positive for him that he played on a bad team. And we've only got, what is it, something like 3 matches? No, we must have 4 matches, I think, and probably something like 10, 15 maps where he's actually been playing with Seoul Dynasty or this Lunatic High roster. Like, this isn't enough to have some kind of variability or even really be able to tell whether he's the best player in the world. They haven't even played against the other top teams in the Overwatch League in a serious setting. And I think when it comes to that, and when people realize that Fleta is the big threat for the team and try and shut him down, and that is their game plan, you'll see him reduced in performance like some of these other players that were lauded as the best players in the world. Guys like Effect, for example, and then when Kongo Panthera are playing against them, Birdring's just on his nuts the entire time and giving him a reduced level of performance. I think this is going to be the same situation with Fleta, because now that people know he's a threat, one of the win conditions for them will be shutting him down.
I mean, totally possible, but if they focus on Fleta, isn't that already inherently an argument for him, and that they don't focus on Je-hong then?
But the thing is, people already have been focusing on Je-hong. People have been focusing on Je-hong for the last 3 or 4 Apex seasons in a row, because they always go for the flex supports, and they know that he's the best flex support in the world, so they want to get him out the picture early on. But
I think
the thing that people have never done is focus on Fleta. So by comparing what we have at the moment, it's heavily weighted in favor of actually people are focusing Je-hong more, and he's still getting these performances.
I think one thing that might hurt Fleta this season is if Seoul Dynasty has to make the choice between protecting Je-hong's ego and protecting Fleta, then there's a weird possibility that resources are going to be allocated to Je-hong. And if we ever see Dynasty struggle, I would put my eggs in that basket that it is because they are overemphasizing the impact Je-hong will have on those games. Because
go on.
Because what we've also seen is, like, if we look at the PTK model, I believe, and we don't have updated stats yet, and I'm also sad that we won't get any from Nexus Cup. But what I feel is, like, now it is actually much more in the DPS players with the LAN client and everything, right?
So, I think also just this crazy meta that we have at the moment, where the tanks aren't even like properly playing dive a lot of the time, and we're seeing a lot more Diva Roadhog and stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's a lot more messy, and the DPS players are having more opportunities to go for these kind of plays. Yeah,
I mean, but who's better when everything's messy as someone that has lived in literal garbage, surrounded by literal garbage for half a year, right? So I think just the diversity in that regard will carry him through. And I would like to answer my own question then. I definitely believe that come the end of the season, Fleta will probably be the MVP of the Overwatch League, but also will probably look much better than Je-hong, which I think has a possibility of not even being the second best player on Seoul Dynasty, which might either go to Toby, depending on how his Mercy develops and how relevant she stays. But also,
how relevant she stays. It's gonna get ground into the dirt, Yiska. It's gonna happen.
Do you have inside information?
No, I have no inside information about it. I know everyone would be begging me for confirmation, but no, I'm not personal friends with Jeff Kaplan or the development team, so no inside information there. But just my hopes that I'm projecting into the future.
Yeah. But it might actually also be Zumba in that sense. I think people will wise up to the fact. I think it is sort of. That's why I also feel like it's a good thing that people are now singing high praises of Coolmat, because I think that opens the door to people more embracing sick off-tank players. I think that will automatically boost the appreciation people will have for Zumba and realize what a sick team Seoul Dynasty actually is.
Yeah, they're very good.
That's sort of also a weakness in, or let's say a certain uncertainty about Je-hong, is that we've never seen him outside of other than season 1, where I'm not going to make an argument for anything coming from that. But in all the other cases, he has had the best backline companion and probably the best tanks at the time. Maybe not in season 3 for Winston, because I thought Mira was not the best Winston at the time. But other than that, he always had a sick supporting lineup, so we don't actually know what he would look like around bad teammates, right? Or let's just say,
I can tell you he wouldn't be getting 50% PTK, because it's just not a role where you could do that, right? He's not going to be getting 50% PTK on Zen. You have to do it by different stuff. But
yeah, I think sure.
I think we've been going for 47 minutes now, and I think with you having raised the concept of other people in the Seoul Dynasty potentially being what you would expect to be perhaps the second best players in the world come the end of Overwatch League. I mean, as a side note as well, if Fleta ends up winning the MVP for Overwatch League Season 1, that'll give him half as many MVP awards as Ryu Je-hong has. So, okay, so he'll still be second tier then.
I will also completely forsake my I told you so dance if that is actually decided by fan vote, because I don't fucking care about fan votes.
Yeah,
but yeah,
XQC will win it if it's fan votes. Or Seal, I mean, who knows? So, and I think a good way to end this one as well, because obviously the way that we set this premise up was that we each picked 2 players that we thought were reasonable to give arguments for, and obviously there are other candidates here for people that we would consider either current world's best players or have been world's best players at different points, depending on how narrow you want it to be, like MVP of tournaments or such. So who are some of the people that either throughout 2017 you've thought had peaks, or that you might expect to be the best players in the world come mid to end of Overwatch League?
Okay, so the highest peaks I saw were definitely Birdring, I would say. During season 3, he sadly didn't deliver as much in the finals, I have to say, which sort of puts a little caveat on that discussion, which is sad. He seems to be kicking back into gear, though. What really surprised me is that Rascal is actually slaying, at least in the preseason. Obviously, there's not much to go on, but he looked much more crisp than he did even during the KDP run. What I will say is, I think the peak of Profit was absolutely nuts.
That was bananas.
Also,
he was definitely the best player in the world at that period of time, I think.
Yes.
I think that was unarguable, because when you saw them have their run through Apex Season 4, and Profit's just going off, he's like playing at the same kind of level. I mean, it's difficult to tell because they weren't playing against each other, but it was the same kind of stuff that we were seeing from Logic's and Contenders, where he was ripping people up, Effect when he was playing for Envious and just tearing people up, and Birdring as well when he was playing for Kong Du Panthera kind of earlier on in Apex Season 3. It was a nuts level of Tracer, and then he went on to Genji and just hard carried with Hureg again filling the secondary slot on Tracer and kind of looking a little bit like a liability at times. But Profit was unreal in that tournament, and then he was hopping onto stuff like Zarya and having insane Zarya performances. Yeah. So I definitely agree with you there. I think Profit's the first one that comes to mind, actually.
I remember when we watched that, like, we were all sitting in TeamSpeak, you were like, what is he doing there? He's on Genji. And then I remember after the series, we all realized he was nuts, but then the stats came out, and I was already running late for work. I'm 5 minutes over. My boss got to rip me a new asshole. I'm like checking on my phone what the stats are on the stats board, and I had to go back in because I'm like, bro, you can't put this up. The Koreans will rip you apart. There's a bug. There's a bug.
Yeah, there's a bug.
And it's like, no, there wasn't a bug. He actually had like 120 kills. Or
I think it was 147 to 50 or something. It was bananas. I mean, I don't think it was quite that. It might have been like to 63 or something. I don't know. It was absolutely insane levels of performance. And again, he's backed up by a very strong team that was enabling him and like shutting down Haxel to make sure that he had the space to work with. But he had a fantastic run. And I agree with you that in the preseason, I mean, he is another player that I think could return to similar heights, but only if the rest of his team's performing well. And at the moment in the preseason, they looked like they were looking at very shaky at times on certain maps, but straight back to form on other maps. So I have no idea really what they're going to do in Overwatch League Season 1.
So let me give you, or ask you one question, because I think a lot of people will be interested in that. Who do you think would be a candidate for MVP the West, including NA and Europe?
Okay, yeah, so we've really just been focusing on Korean players, right? And that's mostly because Apex is the premier tournament outside of the Overwatch League. I find it difficult to talk about the best Western players because a lot of the Western teams have, like, for example, Envious has Effect on it, who's clearly the best player in the West, I think, if you want to say, like, was playing in the West, even though he wasn't actually playing in the West, he was just playing on a Western team or something. Who might it be? In
a world where weeaboos are Americans, everything counts. So, like, all borders have been blasted.
I think this is a difficult one. I wasn't prepared for this. I think that certainly you've got to look at Logic's if he's able to keep up the same kind of performance that he was able to demonstrate. But I think there's something to this whole land choking thing, even though it's not a clear and clean narrative like people like to say it is. I think there's definitely something to that in the way that his team was adapting towards it, and he definitely looked like he was off in a lot of the games where the pressure was actually on him. So that's a big question mark. Who are some other just bananas players? Do we have any absolutely sick Genji? I mean, Sinatra at times has looked like he could be an incredible player with potential to become an MVP later on, but in a couple of his games recently at the World Cup, didn't have the same kind of performance there, and perhaps he needs a very unique style or the team to play around him in some sense, or just needs to be playing against worse players to look at that kind of level. Who else
said Linkser?
Linkser is very good, actually. Linkser has become one of the best DPS players for sure. He's got phenomenal talent, and he's got a large hero pool that spans across kind of Genji, and then his Tracer's actually really good, and he's got a good Pharah and Mei and Widowmaker and stuff like this as well. I think he would be a candidate. Again, I don't think we've seen too much from him, and the performances that he's had have not been on the same kind of... when you think about Linkser within Giganti, they haven't been on the same kind of level as, for example, Prophet or Effect or Birdring, in the same kind of like, he's just blowing the enemy team away. He's had very good moments, but he hasn't been the carry. He doesn't play, or at least within Giganti, they didn't play a very playmaky kind of style. They played a very conservative style. So although he looked phenomenal, he didn't flash as much. Not that that's necessary to be considered the best player in the world. I mean, do we have any like star tanks and supports that would be in a similar point? I mean,
is one.
Yeah, I don't think that he is a candidate for best player in the world, though, for my mind. I mean, that he hasn't played on good enough teams against good enough competition to really be considered in the same vein, I think. And the support players, I think you have to think about Unko and Chips there. Unko's pretty excellent. Neither of them can really play the other heroes in the same way, the way that Je-hong can go over to stuff like Mei, Widowmaker, Soldier 76 and still have such a big impact for his team. But Unko can also play the Mercy to a very high level, as can Chips, actually. So I think that there's
Tvik is often brought up.
I think Tvik is peaked at the end of 2016 and throughout the whole of 2017 has been looking like he shouldn't actually be in the candidacy for when people talk about best player in the world. He may be one of the most intelligent players in the world or one of the most flexible players in the world, but he just hasn't had the same kind of performances. Even when his team was playing very well, he was actually playing the secondary DPS and not shining, apart from on a couple of clutch maps or a couple of clutch Dragon Blades and stuff. So I don't think that I think that's one of those things where people, he had a period where he was the best player in the world, I think, in what must that have been, October, November 2016, and people just kind of remember that with nostalgia and rose tinted glasses and carry it forward to today.
I mean, Tvik in that sense is sort of like the anti Fleta, in the sense that he only feels loyalty towards certain players, definitely not when he is actually in the best team in the world. He feels like, okay, I got to jump to the next one to potentially have more. I mean, I sort of admire that situation, because if you're in the best team in the world, which he was twice in, I would say, both Rogue, like very early, right? The one that won Takeover 1 or whatever.
Sure.
And before that, IDDQD or whatever in beta, he always felt like, okay, this is probably not. He was thinking far and trying to come up even with better solutions. And at some point, that approach might bite you in the ass. I don't know what will happen in the future, because there's obviously a lot of potential to add new players to Florida. So maybe they get someone mid-season and they might get bounced back, right? So
the only other person that springs to mind as well when we talk about Western players that you might consider to be kind of best in the world or best in the world candidates, because I don't think any of the Western players are really best in the world, is Nox for my money. Because if you consider the wide amount that he actually brings to the team, it's difficult to ever nominate just a tank player, but the fact that he also provides kind of calling and strategy to the team and can play Lucio to actually a pretty high degree was better than wins on Lucio, honestly, if we were talking about what he provides in terms of his peeling or his mechanical skill or just filling in the role. I think that Nox is another player that you could put up there in terms of like the results that he's got and the ways that he's contributed to teams and stuff as well. I think he would be another player that you would possibly add in there at the same kind of with some kind of thought. He has an argument behind him, even if it's not as strong as a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, the other one in that team would be AKM, right?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, AKM should have really sprung to mind instantly, because he is. But the thing with AKM is he's got a narrow kind of niche hero pool. I think he plays. It's not even that narrow. It's just really quite niche. He plays a very good Soldier 76, probably the best in the world, other than maybe Defran when he used to play it. Then he plays Widowmaker to a very high level, but not one of the best in the world. Just like a very good potential carry Widowmaker. He plays an incredible McCree, definitely one of the best in the world, McCree. And then he also has played stuff like Reaper in the past and Tracer,
Farah,
but to like a low level.
Like
oh, and of course
Farah,
Farah
very
as well.
good.
His Farah is
obviously
very
a
good.
lot. Right,
So he has quite a wide hero pool, but he doesn't play the stuff that's normally the staples of the meta. He doesn't play Tracer to a high level. He doesn't play Genji. You kind of just have to stick him on either McCree or Soldier 76, or you can run him on Farah, and so it creates these weird situations where unless he widens his hero pool, I'm not sure whether he'll ever be in a position where he can offer be the de facto best choice for a team. they kind of just have to build around AKM, which isn't a bad thing because he's fantastic, but you do have to build your team around him, I think. So when people always bring up like, oh, AKM should be an insta pickup for some of these teams, it's like, I'm not really sure, because if you've got a hit scan guy, you have to sub him out, and normally your hit scan guy is the one that can play Tracer. Like maybe you can do it if you had someone like Linksa with him who can play the Genji and the Tracer in this kind of comp, or someone else who can play the Junkrat Genji Tracer, and then AKM plays a nice complementary hero pool to them. But they're kind of rare. You don't often get Genji Tracer Junkrat players that can complement AKM in that kind of way.
Isn't it a nice coincidence that a guy that has clearly a more limited hero pool than Fleta is potentially one of your best players?
Sure. I mean, you said West.
Oh, yeah, I give you that. Yeah. I mean, it would be unfair to nail you to that.
So I think that's a good place to end this one. Have I swayed you? Are you gonna claim that Ryu Je-hong is now the best player in the world?
At this very moment, no.
Was he the best player of 2017?
Of 2017? Yes.
Okay. I can rest on that. I'm gonna so also I think what would be interesting, if you've managed to listen all the way to the end here, if you throughout this video series as well, if you enjoy if you agree with the person who's doing the pro argument, in this case that Fleta is the best player in the world, if you agree with Yiska, hit the thumbs up button. If you agree with me, even though it's on my channel, hit the thumbs down button, make everyone else
think. Terrible strategy.
Hit the thumbs down button. Make everyone else think that it's just trash content, and thanks for that. But don't downvote it on Reddit. Just only on YouTube. Only on YouTube. We'll just mess with their algorithms. We'll see you on the next one.